Hello again, beautiful people, and thank you for joining me. I am Annabelle Kemi, your host, and on the other side, we meet here to discuss issues that improve our minds and make us transform from mediocre lifestyles to maverick lifestyles. Today on this show, I'll be discussing how to unravel the dangers of codependency in relationships. If you've followed my podcast all this while, you know that I am not a fan of relationship talk. I like to avoid it because, as I always say, I'm not an expert on relationships. However, when it comes to codependency, I feel like it is something that a lot of us grapple with and we more or less avoid talking about it, despite the fact that it affects our lives a great deal. So I decided to just take the risk today, research codependency, and bring it to you, my friends. So here we go. I have discovered that in quite some seemingly perfect relationships, one or both partners are usually miserable. They are simply suffering and smiling. The irony is that some ignorant persons would admire and idolize such relationships, praying for one like that. And if such a relationship finally hits the rocks, it is attributed to irreconcilable differences. Well, I've got news for you. The culprit, in more cases than we choose to admit, is what has been christened codependency. Ladies and gentlemen, codependency is dangerous. Codependency is a complex and often misunderstood phenomenon that permeates various aspects of human relationships. Codependency could have profound effects on individuals and their connections with others. And on this podcast episode today, I will try to dig into the intricacies of codependency. I'll explore its origin, manifestations, and the detrimental impacts it could have on mental health and relationships. So let's consider codependency in context. Codependency reflects an unhealthy reliance on others for emotional and psychological well-being. It often involves a person sacrificing their own needs and desires to meet the demands of someone else, resulting in an imbalanced and unsustainable dynamic. Emphasis on unsustainable. Codependency is defined as the dysfunctional and one-sided relationship where one person relies excessively on another for approval, validation, and a sense of identity. To better understand codependency, let's consider the following scenarios. So let's start with the enabler. The enabler is an individual that may exhibit codependent behavior by enabling someone with addictive tendencies. The enabler is driven by a need to feel needed, and they may make excuses for addictive behaviors and cover up its consequences and ultimately perpetuate a destructive cycle. Example of enablers are people who have partners that are probably excessively overweight. Yes, they see nothing wrong in overfeeding these people and enabling that habit of not taking care of themselves simply because they are afraid of losing that person. Or it could be that you have a partner who treats you badly and you don't see anything wrong in, or you make excuses for that person over time. And you've come to believe that the person is just being themselves and they can't help themselves. So you enable that bad behavior and that destructive cycle continues. Now, the second scenario is the people pleaser. A people pleaser is someone who goes to great lengths to meet the expectations and demands of others, often at the expense of their own well-being. This person seeks validation and approval from external sources, thus relying on affirmation of others to define their self-worth. This is what happens with drug addicts a lot of time. And you see a lot of people pleasers even in the workplace. You see a lot of people who are just yes men. And because they want to be carried along, they want to feel like they belong in that big boy or big girl circle in the workplace, the people that matter. Basically, they please others and displease themselves. Now, a little insight on codependency. You now have a fair idea of how codependency often plays out from the scenarios I gave you. Let's delve into its roots. Codependency often has its roots in childhood experiences, such as growing up in a dysfunctional family where emotional needs were unmet or neglected totally. It is closely linked with the anxious, preoccupied attachment style in psychology. Now, individuals with this attachment style crave closeness and fear rejection. So it drives them to engage in behaviors that maintain toxic connections, even if it is detrimental. Attachment theory suggests that Early relationships with caregivers play a crucial role in shaping one's capacity for healthy connections later in life. So, consequently, people who experience inconsistent or inadequate caregiving may develop patterns of codependency as a coping mechanism. Like I said earlier, they want to feel among, they want to be loved because they didn't get it as children. Recognizing codependency requires an awareness of its various manifestations. While each case is unique, common signs include low self esteem, the first one, and this involves individuals struggling with codependency that have a poor self image and derive a sense of worth from external validation, like I have said earlier. This can lead to a constant need for affirmation and approval. With social media, the pressure becomes even more intense. A lot of people live their lives or get their satisfaction from trying to be what they see on social media. So, in essence, they live fake lives. Another common sign of codependency is difficulty in setting boundaries. Codependents find it challenging to establish and maintain healthy boundaries. They feel guilty or anxious when asserting their needs, which leads to a perpetual cycle of self-sacrifice. I encourage you to go back to the episode where I spoke about setting boundaries to understand the whole idea behind setting boundaries. Another sign of codependency is fear of abandonment. In the earlier scenario I pointed out, I noted that some people, because they do not want to lose their partners, they start doing things that enable the bad behaviors of their partners. So a deep-seated fear of abandonment is the hallmark of codependency. Victims go to great lengths to avoid being alone, even if it means tolerating unhealthy and harmful relationships. That is why you see people being cheated and beaten up by their partners, but they stay there because they are afraid of losing those partners. Another sign of codependency is control issues. Codependents often attempt to control and manipulate their surroundings just to maintain a semblance of stability. This is the other side of those who fear abandonment. A lot of times, narcissists kind of reflect this a lot because they want to maintain control and act like everything is okay. They go to extra lengths to show their partners that they are in charge. This control could extend to their partner's behaviors and choices. They tell you where to go, what to wear, who to relate with, how to live your life generally. So they are always sure that they are in charge of your life. And this is just another reflection of codependency. And it helps them to kind of reinforce their sense of dependency from you now. Now let's consider the dangers of codependency. The desire for connection is innate to human beings. However, codependency takes this to an extreme. It poses several dangers to individuals and their relationships. Some of such dangers include loss of individuality. Codependency often leads to a loss of your individual identity. You lose a sense of self. You tend to become entangled in the needs and desires of another person or your partner, and you find it challenging to make decisions independently or to pursue your personal goals. Another vital danger of codependency is the cycle of unhealthy relationships. Codependency tends to perpetuate a cycle of unhealthy relationships amongst individuals because they repeatedly find themselves in situations where they become overly dependent on others or attract those who exploit their need for approval. That is why you see some people say that they tend to always attract the wrong partners or toxic partners. Most times it is not the fault of the partner, it is your fault because you have a tendency to be codependent on your partners. So you seek out unconsciously those people who you can be codependent on. So it encourages a cycle of unhealthy relationships. Also, mental health implications are one very vital effect of codependency. The constant stress and anxiety associated with codependency could take a toll on your mental health. It leads to depression, anxiety disorders, and substance abuse issues, which are very common conditions with codependency. You find people following a group of friends simply because they want to feel among, and that is a sign of codependency. Also, you have limited emotional growth. Codependency stunts your emotional growth and self-discovery. You don't know who you are, so how do you even discover your true self? The focus on meeting others' needs prevents you from developing a strong sense of self and pursuing your personal growth. You're even afraid to become the person you truly know you should be. That is a sign or an effect of codependency. Let's look at effects of codependency now, particularly on relationships. Codependency could wreak havoc on relationships. It doesn't matter if they are romantic relationships, friendships, or even family dynamics. Codependency makes a mess of all types of relationships. Let's briefly explore each dynamic. First, a look at family dynamics. Codependency within families often involves one member taking on the role of the caretaker at the expense of their own needs. In the African setting, this is quite common. The firstborn child or the most financially stable sibling is often inundated with the responsibility of other members of the family. Such arrangements lead to strained relationships and oftentimes hinder the development of healthy familial bonds. You find out that a member of the family just feels that, why is there so much pressure on me? Why do I have to take care of every other person? And before you know it strains their relationship. They feel used by other members of their family. Trust me, I've been on that boat too. Now a look at friendships. Codependency in friendships may manifest as one friend consistently prioritizing the need of the other friend to the detriment of their own well-being. This imbalance can strain friendship and create an unsustainable dynamic. Sadly, many friendships are like this, and in no time, friends could become strangers because you can only depend on someone for so long and you can only try to please the other party for so long. This is why lots of friendships over time just fizzle out. Now, codependency in romantic relationships. In romantic relationships, codependency often leads to an unhealthy interdependence. That is what I have been talking about from the start. One partner may become overly reliant on the other for emotional support. This leads to a power imbalance and potential resentment. You find that this would later result in toxicity and sometimes even violence and abuse. Now, having dealt with the different dynamics in relationships as it relates to codependency, how do you break free? Breaking free of codependency is a challenging but essential process. It is necessary if you want to reclaim your autonomy and foster healthier relationships. Cognitive behavioral therapy and attachment-focused therapies have shown some level of effectiveness in treating codependency. Some of these therapeutic approaches are what I have lined up for you. Now, the first step to overcome codependency is self-awareness. And this indicates that you must recognize and acknowledge codependent patterns in your relationships. This is crucial for initiating positive change. If you do not even recognize that you are in a codependent relationship, how do you find help? Which is my next point. Get help. Professional therapies, support groups, counseling can provide invaluable assistance in addressing codependency. A lot of times in this part of the world, Africa, Nigeria, we downplay the effect of counseling and therapy, but it has been shown that it is increasingly important in this age and time to get such help. A trained therapist can help you explore the root causes of your codependency, tracing it back to childhood traumas and all, and help you develop healthier coping mechanisms. The next will be to cultivate self-love. Building self-esteem and self-love is a fundamental aspect of overcoming codependency. It involves prioritizing your needs. If you lack self-love, you prioritize the other partner's needs. Practice self-compassion. Foster a positive self-image. That way you avoid being codependent on your partner. Lastly, let me just reflect on what I've been talking about as it relates to codependency. First, remember that codependency is a persuasive issue that can have profound and lasting effects on individuals and their relationships. By understanding the origin of codependency, how it manifests, and the dangers of codependency, you can embark on a journey of self-discovery and healing. Breaking free from codependency requires commitment, self-awareness, and often professional support. Doing so, you can pave the way for a healthier, more balanced relationship, and of course, a more fulfilling life. And that's it for this topic today and this episode of The Other Side, where Maverick Minds meet. I hope you have gained a thing or two, and I hope you break free from that codependent relationship you are in. A lot of us are in codependent relationships and we do not even realize it. I think you should audit your relationship today and know if you are actually being codependent or your partner is codependent on you. I wish you love and light as you take this step. But before I leave you, as usual, let me encourage you to like this episode, share it, subscribe to this channel, comment, give feedbacks, and I'll be here with you to answer all your questions and suggestions to improve this podcast. Thank you for listening once again. I am Annabelle Kemi, and this has been The Other Side. See you again next week.